She looked out over the ocean and she watches the tide rose in. And she passed on that cigarette into a little boy's head.
Welcome, everybody, to Pod for the People, Episode 8. This is a podcast put out by the Drew Glover for City Council campaign that focuses on issues in Santa Cruz, art, activism, politics, and all the kinds of things that make Santa Cruz a special place to be. I'm your host, Drew Glover, born and raised here in Santa Cruz, and I'm also a candidate for the Santa Cruz City Council election this November the 6th, 2018. So it's pretty great to be able to have this opportunity to talk to everyone and address so many different important issues. Every week, we have guests from around the community that are focusing on different projects, areas of interest, and causes to provide a window into the work that's going on, the ways that people can plug in, and the things that are important to me, to them, and ideally to you. Just like every week, I want to let you know that this podcast is created with the help of the 365 Producer Program. 365 Producer is an artist training program located right here in Santa Cruz. 365 Producer students learn all the skills that you need to create podcasts just like this one, as well as music, video, photography, and artist development. You can check them out at 365producer.com. I think you'll be happy. So normally we jump right into the guest mode on the show, but this week, because the City Council's back in session and we have some pretty important stuff coming up on Tuesday, I want to start by doing some headlines. So for those who don't know, the City Council meets every Tuesday, or every other Tuesday, rather. So you can check them out whenever you want to go and learn about what's going on in the city. You can also go to the website, which is the City of Santa Cruz. If you go to cityofsantacruz.com and search for the City Council meetings, you can find a full list of not only the upcoming agendas and things that are going to be talked about, but also you can check out what happened at the last City Council meetings and all the ones before it, so you can follow up to learn about voting trends, who represents what, and some of the decisions that have been made that impact all of us here in Santa Cruz. So just to jump right into what's been going on in City Council and what we can expect this coming Tuesday, which is September the 11th, an ominous day for a variety of reasons, we have a bunch of discussions around different measures. So for those of you that don't know, the City Council meetings are broken into two primary meeting times. There's one that starts around 1:45 in the afternoon, and that runs through some different agenda items. And then they have a 7 p.m. session, which is a little bit later, and that has an opportunity for a lot of public to get involved. There's been some critique with the City Council about the earlier session time because it makes it so that people that are working or are unable to attend have a limited availability to be able to participate in the democratic process. So are there ways to make City Council more accessible? Definitely. Can we make it happen? Absolutely. And that's why it's important to have people on the council that are willing to figure out ways to make it so that democracy in Santa Cruz is accessible to everyone. So let's get into what's happening at the 1:45 session. There's going to be some conversation about the support for Measure G. If you haven't heard about Measure G before, it's a half-cent sales tax that's going to be levied across the county to support countywide services, specifically focusing on mental health needs in the county. The problem that some people might say with it is that it goes into an unrestricted fund, so into the general fund, where that money can actually be allocated to whatever it wants instead of being restricted to just mental health. So there are some people that are for it, there are some people that are against it, and we'd love to know what you think. So if you want to leave a message in the comments below the podcast, we can start a conversation about Measure G and the pros and cons, but they'll be talking about whether the City Council wants to support it. Also with Measure H, now this one is amazing and has a lot of support behind it. Measure H is the affordable housing bond that would generate over $100 million in the county for the development of affordable housing. Also, along with that, it gives us extra oomph to leverage state funding to help us build more in the area. And as we all know, Santa Cruz County especially is in need of some serious housing reform to make sure that we can maximize the amount of housing that we have while being sustainable and making it so that the people that live in our community can stay in our community instead of getting pushed out. The city council will be voting on whether to support Measure H. I have already come out publicly and endorsed Measure H, so it's something that I support and I hope that you vote for in November. Other things that are going to be on there focus on the rent situation. So the official term for it is the... I'll cut that down. Where'd it go? There we go. So it's called the Relocation Assistance for Displaced Tenants Ordinance, and it's talking about the amendment and the update. And for those of you that don't know or haven't heard about it before, the Relocation Assistance and Displacement Tenants Ordinance is what some are referring to as fake rent control, which is a really interesting conversation to have since the topic of Measure M and rent control in general is really heated and, has a lot of supporters and opposition on both sides, but for different and very contrasting reasons. This suggested ordinance would make it so that landlords would have the ability to increase rent by 10% every year, which some say is really unsustainable. The ordinance, though, says that if they increase it more than 10% in 1 year or more than 15% in any 2 consecutive years, it will trigger relocation assistance for tenants should they choose to leave their home rather than accept the rent increases above the set thresholds. It's problematic in a lot of different ways, especially because the relocation assistance that's in Measure M, it has a lot more levels of protection around just cause for evictions and relocation assistance. This one, like I mentioned before, has been stated to be unsustainable and will make it a lot harder for low-income renters to be able to stay in the area, especially when, if you think over 4 years, your rent can increase by 40% and not be supported with relocation assistance. There's a lot of problems there. But again, we'd love to hear what your perspective is. Feel free to leave a comment below. I'll be there at the meeting on Tuesday. So if you're interested, you can come and speak your mind, and or you can check in that agenda section, like I mentioned before, on their website and check out the video from the event and the meeting and learn all of the different perspectives that people are going to come speak about. Later at the 7th, there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on during the afternoon one, from a cannabis ordinance update to river flood control projects, water treatment plants, the Beach Wharf intersection roundabout signs and markings, because if you've ever gone around that roundabout during a heavy traffic time with people from out of town, it's probably the most dangerous roundabout you've ever gone around because people don't know where they're going. It's really intense. So those are some of the other things that City Council focuses on. The 7 o'clock agenda item is a big one, which talks about the library mixed use project. So there's a proposition from city planning and the city manager's office to build a new library where the farmers market is downtown right now, to take over that whole parking lot. The issue is that they want to include a massive parking garage inside of the library, above it on the next level up, that could be used for mixed-use affordable housing. It could be used for a variety of other things. But there's a lot of controversy surrounding the project because of some of the claims made by a previous parking analyst that was working with the city and the issues that are associated with parking trends, the way that parking is going to be going over the next 20 and 30 years, and the best ways that we can use the money that's currently in the budget now to maximize the effectiveness of transportation. And the question is, does that mean adding new parking spaces, which we know will increase the use of single-person vehicles if they feel that there's more access to them downtown? So we're going to have someone on the show next week probably to talk about the library project, because it's a big issue right now, and especially with the new news coming out about the questionable decisions by the city to move forward, even against the recommendations of a consultant, what those next steps will be. So many things in City Council, and that was a quick 5-minute overview. If you dive into what's going on, there is a lot, but we don't want to take up the entire show by analyzing the City Council agenda. We're going to be bringing people in to talk about each one of these specific items that I talked about in future shows. So the rental assistance ordinance, the library project, and even things that have to do with the roundabouts, talking about transportation, the most effective way to do it. So now that we've gotten through that and got a chance to kind of know what's going to be talked about at City Council, just a reminder that meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, September 11th. The first session starts at 1:45. The second session starts at 7 p.m. Last week on the show, we had Brent Adams, a musician, a filmmaker, and a political activist who advocates for the rights and resources of people experiencing homelessness. He talked about the storage program that is operating through the warming center where people can come and drop off their belongings throughout the day so they have the opportunity to go and shower, to go and apply for jobs, to be able to walk around standing up straight instead of having to lug around 10, 20, 100 pounds of their personal belongings with the possibility of them being tossed away. So great work going on there. Also with the warming center that he's working on to provide a space during the freezing nights for people to be able to come and stay with blankets and a sense of community. And a whole bunch of other things. So if you haven't had a chance yet, go back and check out the last episode. There's a bunch of links to Brent's work in that comment section. And feel free to leave your thoughts, or if you're interested in getting involved, we can connect you to Brent and some of those different programs so that you can have a firsthand experience of working with people that are experiencing homelessness or are living outside. This week, though, we have someone really special with us, Trianna Feruza, who's a local musician raised in Santa Cruz since she was 2, and a working student, a creative collaborator, and a representative of the artistic youth voice in Santa Cruz. It's a pleasure to have you on the show, Trianna.
Thanks, Drew. How you doing?
Amazing. It's been a really long day. I showed you a picture of I showed you my calendar before. I'm going from 8 or 9 o'clock this morning until 9 o'clock tonight, but it's
busy man with a great purpose. I like it.
The reality of being on the campaign trail and doing all of the other stuff. I don't know if you looked at some of the other work that I do, but I work at the Resource Center for Nonviolence. I'm the president of the United Nations Association of Santa Cruz County. I sit on the city's commission for the prevention of violence against women, lead after-school programs, all that kind of stuff. Yes,
all
snaps.
Snaps to that, man.
So it's a lot of work, but I was having a conversation over lunch today with my friend, and we were acknowledging that it's a privilege to be able to do the work. It's the ability to opt into investing my time and energy into making a better community for people and making it so that it's more representative. So I don't get stressed out about it as much as possible and just kind of focus on the positivity of the work and the impact that it's having on my own life and ideally the life of other people. So that's the ultimate goal.
Well, I think that's just absolutely incredible. Good on you for doing it. You know what I mean? Your time is valuable because you only live once, right?
Only live once. And I always think
amazing.
about that. I'm like 32 now, and it's like, man, another good 40 or 50 years on the planet. So what can I do unless they find out a way to extend life? Who knows?
We aren't far off, man.
No, we are living in the future. It's a good time to be a human.
Ugh.
So before we kind of jump into it, I said a whole bunch of things about the stuff that you do, but just so that people know and a little bit about your background and where you're coming from, like, who is Trianna Feruza?
Well, I came to Santa Cruz at age 2. I've been really blessed to grow up with a really amazing family and a really amazing community. So my grandfather, whose name is Suleiman, he was in this group back in the 60s called Kaleidoscope, and basically what they did was took Middle Eastern and world music influences and incorporated it into rock. And so my grandpa has been learning world music for basically his whole life, and I've been blessed enough to be involved through him in the flamenco communities, the belly dance communities, a bunch of different drum circles and things like that. And being able to be in the belly dance community and the flamenco community just broadens my horizons to so many different cultures and so many different groups of people that are here in the Bay Area. And it's a real blessing to be able to learn from so many different people and have a broader spectrum on how I want to create my music and where I want to put that energy into. Because for me, growing up with a musical family, it gives me an intent with my music. It's like I intend to spread a message and to connect, to unify through an all-encompassing vibration, and that's what music is to me. And being able to grow up in a family that supports that and endorses that. Also, belly dancing is cool as hell.
That is cool.
Yeah, so that's that's kind of my background and where I came up from. So I've been singing world music like Albanian, Serbian, Macedonian music since I was itty bitty. I used to belly dance on my dad's giant drum that he would have straps on his back, and my mom would be belly dancing around, and my grandpa would be playing a doumbek on the side, and my brother would be playing the violin, and I'd just be a little 3-year-old on this drum dancing around, and it's just I'm really blessed.
And a lot of stuff you said there really stuck out to me. The broadening of understanding of culture and diversity, and the power of music and spreading a message, connecting and unifying people. So, how has the aspect of being exposed to such a broad, diverse range of cultures impacted you in your life in general and in your music?
Well, in my music is growing up, flamenco really stuck out to me. And in flamenco, it's all about complete passion and completely throwing yourself into how you perform on stage. And it's really all about giving it your all. And that's what music grew to be for me, is getting little bits and pieces from all over the world. We're really fortunate here in the United States, and listening to all of these different songs passed down through the generations from other cultures really gives you a broader perspective. If you actually listen to the songs and you translate the lyrics, and you get to really understand how blessed you are to be able to listen in and get all of their perspectives and add it to your own, because the Bay Area in and of itself is a huge cultural melding pot. And I just think that being able to really assess all of those different cultures as well as configure them into my sense of self it's just made me grateful and really made me understand how hard it is for most people to just sit down and listen and really have critical thinking when they're encountering other cultures and other peoples and other music. Is a lot of people are so closed in, and something that I've been really blessed with growing up with all these different communities is to really be able to sit and listen and absorb rather than inflate and talk about what I've got. You know what I mean? And
Take up
it's
space.
it's really beautiful.
When I opened my laptop, you had commented on my sticker, which people can't see, of course, it's a podcast, but it's a sticker of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And there's something that you just said that was really important to me, because in his book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, there's a line that talks about the importance of unity, but he emphasizes the difference between unity and uniformity, where we can all come together and have our own voice and our own flavor and our own input, but be a part of a larger group without having to change who we are to be able to be a part of that group, and understanding and appreciating the variety of experiences and beliefs and skill sets that we all have, and understanding that it builds a stronger community to have that sense of diversity and understanding. Plus, being raised around such a diverse group of people and seeing those different viewpoints, it gives you come from a unique perspective from that background, because it gives you more empathy, I would imagine, to be able to understand where other people are coming from, and then also figure out ways that you can work more closely with them to infuse their perspective or their skills or their talent, sound, whatever it may be, into the way that you approach the world. It's really amazing. And something that it also reminded me of was, I was looking on Facebook recently, and there was this video of an Indian symphony where there were like over 1,000 sitar players and, people on drums and all this other kind of stuff. And it was absolutely beautiful and mesmerizing with the way that they all worked together, and then the sound associated with it. And it blew my mind to think that at one point in time in history, and even today, that people would see that and be like, ugh, God, that's so lame. Or, oh, man, I totally don't respect them. Or to see them as inferior, like when they were, colonized by the British and all this other kind of stuff, to come in and try and fix them, when instead it was like this it still is this beautiful culture of expression and spirituality. And it just, that's why diversity is one of my main talking points within the campaign. Also, diversity in representation and diversity in voice when it comes to analyzing situations. And on the city council this November, when I get on the city council, I'll be the first African American guy ever on the city council in the history of the city. So it kind of shows you the lack of inclusion that has been going on in the policymaking process. And I'm sure that's going to jump into some of the stuff we talk about a little bit later. But what else? Just in your music life background, like what kind of music do you sing now?
Well, right now I've been going to Cabrillo for a little over a year and a half now, And I'm more focusing on jazz. I've been studying flamenco with some close family friends for the past year or so, and just delving more into that. But actually, a point that you brought up that really triggered me was back in ancient Egypt, the pharaoh used to have this great hall, and what they used to do is they used to bring the community into that hall, and they would all tune their instruments to a weird key and play this one resounding note that would vibrate everybody, and that was God communicating to the people. So you'd have a giant prayer room where everyone would be on the floor praying, and there would just be this reverberation of a singular note from all of these collective instruments to just create this collective higher energy. And I really liked what you said about really like watching and being amazed by the Indian choir that you were talking about, because for me, something that I'm kind of having an issue with in my generation is if someone my age, like the regular run-of-the-mill Santa Cruz youth, would see something like that and not necessarily be like, oh, that's lame, but instead of absorbing, like I was talking about, they would take out their phones and they would film it, and everything's through. You don't really experience things by yourself anymore. In my English 2 class, actually, we're reading 1984 by George Orwell. And rereading that book for like the 3rd time has really given me a...
Good book.
Yeah, it is. It's too real, honestly. And it's just given me a perspective on that friend that you have in your pocket, and how so many people that I know that are around my age would rather, instead of watching, would rather film and rewatch through the screen. And it's just stuff like that I really appreciated you appreciating it,
right.
Because a lot of my peers are more invested in
And just so everyone knows, how old are you?
I am 18. 18,
there you go. Okay, so I'm also a student at Cabrillo, which is always really funny to tell people, because they're like, wait, you're running for city council and you're in school? What's going on with that? I am in a photography class because I'm also a photographer, and we're looking at photography and social media in social change and how that looks and works. And the lecture that I was engaged with yesterday was talking about exactly what you're just talking about, the transition of medium and how that changes the message and the way that we absorb the information, where now when we're at events or concerts or whatever and we're taking like 500, 1,000 pictures with our phones, it's harder for us to ingrain the information into our brain because we're so ready to be able to take the next shot and then go back and review it later. And then do we actually go back and review it later? So technology and the way it interacts with people is really interesting, especially with music, especially with politics, because that's one thing that we're doing with the campaign, because you've seen in the campaign video, is that we're trying to break away from the traditional model of campaigning where it's print media, getting my name in front of as many people as possible so that when they get to the polls, they go, oh, yeah, I saw that guy's name like 20,000 times. It must be the right one for me to choose. Because when I was 18, that's how I voted. Which is crazy because there's people right now in the city council that I know I voted for when I was 18 and they've been there for that long. And I've been able to see the work that they've done now that I'm cued into politics. And those are definitely not the values that I would have wanted to represent then. But it was because of my understanding and the tactics of politicking. So instead, we're trying to break away from that money-based model and focus more on a community and relationship-based model so that when people go out and have conversations with their friends or they're on social media, people are sharing this content of things that they truly care about so that they can connect with that message and carry it into their circles of people instead of like, oh, I saw this flyer for some guy, I'm going to put it in my pocket and then maybe or maybe not vote for him. You know, it's a really interesting switch. But what inspires you in music? We talked about the diversity. We talked about the different kind of influences that you've had, and now you're in jazz, and I think that's some of the music that we're going to listen to in a second here is one of your songs with jazz.
Yep.
But so why jazz? What inspires you to write your music? And then we're going to listen to a song, and then I'd love to hear your influence of it because I love the title.
Well, I guess it's more of like a jazz fusion, kind of my dream with music. So I'm going to set the stage for you right
There
now.
we go.
If Trianna Feruza were to be a working, touring musician that was able to access all the lights I wanted, all the dancers I wanted, all of the musicians I wanted, I'm really blessed to have a lot of amazing musicians in my life, but if I was able to pay them what they're worth, how I would go about my big show, I've been thinking about this for a while. This is the end goal dream, would be what I want to do with the community that I've grown up in is I want to have this show that I want to create an album of basically R&B hip hop world fusion.
Hmm.
So how that looks is each song would have an instrumental influence from a different part of the world. Like there'd be one song with an Albanian influence, one song with a Southeast Asian influence, one song with an Indian influence, and just different stuff like that, and bring in maybe choruses from old folk songs, like have a flamenco style and have a like coro from like classic flamenco piece in there, and then add in R&B and hip hop and sort of jazz with English lyrics over it, and have how the show would look is the first song, like let's say that the instrumental was Southeast Asian, right? I would begin the song and start singing, and this girl would come out doing Southeast Asian dancing, and throughout the show, it would progress into each different world place that the song is from. A different dancer would come out and do the cultural dance of that place. And so it would basically, we'd go through different parts of the world through the show with all of these different dancers doing these amazing things, and then at the end we would have a giant world fusion group unifying dance number jam where everybody comes together, and it just talks about how it's about being unified. We're all the same person. My DNA isn't too far off from your DNA. You know what I mean? It's like everything else doesn't necessarily matter if we can all just connect and be a part of being, which is why I feel like I'm here, is just, and why I was able to do music, is to unify and shed more light on the fact that we aren't that different, and we can all get together and just have a great time, and that would be the ultimatum right there.
That's great. That's one of the messages of Dr. King too. He was instrumental in starting the Poor People's Campaign, which was back in the late 60s, and that was bringing people together across racial, partisan, and religious lines to start talking about income inequality in the communities, because the system uses our small differences to divide us and separate us, which then causes us to fight amongst ourselves instead of focusing on the big problem, which is the severe funneling of wealth to the very small few at the top of the ladder, and then us kind of fighting amongst ourselves, which after his assassination, it kind of slowed down the movement, but it restarted 2.5, 3 years ago nationwide. And so now we have a local chapter here in Santa Cruz called the Santa Cruz County Poor People's Campaign, which I'm the chair of. And so it'd be great to incorporate some of your music in the events that we have coming up, where we have town halls and even some of the voter registration drives that we have planned in October. So that's another great opportunity to get involved and carry that message of unity and community power. I think would be a
yes, and yes.
There we go.
1,000 times over. That's actually why I love jazz so much, is because back in the day it used to be the speakeasies where poor musicians would go to go jam out and make money, and then they got picked up. Like Louis Armstrong made hundreds of thousands of dollars from being found at a speakeasy, and that's what jazz is. Jazz was a cultivation of people in New Orleans that really didn't have much, that were able to, through musical endeavors, create something for themselves and give themselves a backdrop to shed a light on the road for so many other musicians in their footsteps. And it's a really beautiful thing. That's why I love jazz so much, is it just shines a light on so many different roads.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Louis Armstrong. Do you study historic jazz? That's a pretty awesome fact to know, that he was found in a speakeasy.
Yeah, I actually I took Wally's jazz appreciation class at Cabrillo, and I learned all about the history of jazz, and he's just an amazing singer and guitar player. Wally's World, look it up.
Is that what they call it?
That's his group. They're awesome.
So the song is called Third Eye, which we're going to listen to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and we'll listen to it, and then I'm super curious to know what inspired you and influenced you to write that song. And then we're going to talk about some of the things you might care about in Santa Cruz and how it might pertain to that song or the message that's in it. So let's just see how it goes. Without further ado, here's Third Eye from Trianna Feruza.
Ain't a blessing, it's a gift. and let your mind explode. And let your mind explode.
Awesome. Wow. That was great.
Thanks.
So, beautiful vocals, amazing, great brass instrument sounds throughout the whole thing. Your backup band is stupendous at carrying that vibe. So, talk a little about the message of the song. I heard a bunch of stuff that popped out that I was taking some notes on, but tell us what it's about.
So I did this project with a really good family friend, David Satori, who is in a couple different groups, Dirtwire and Beats Antique, and he's just an amazing, incredible musician, and he did the instrumentals for that project. And I was about 13 at the time when I
Wow.
made it, so it's an introspective piece for me for sure. I love that song. I love performing it live. It's definitely really interesting to hear the recorded version and then think about where I am now vocally versus where I was. It's a big change, but I really love that song because it covers so many things that I was really feeling at the time. Like in the beginning, it's all you are is a tease. That's what he said. Was like when I was younger, I'm a really exuberant. I'm an extrovert.
You
To
are
say the
definitely an
least.
extrovert, yes.
And something that used to come across to me is I'm really friendly to people. If I walk by someone on the street, I'm not going to look at the ground. If I'm walking next to you, I'm going to make eye contact and I'm going to smile and I'm going to nod and I'm going to acknowledge that I'm seeing you. And something that walking around downtown Santa Cruz a lot when I was younger, I used to experience was people being like, "Oh, you must be flirting." And just getting hit on in that weird way and just it was just something that was really frustrating for me personally was because why is my friendliness supposed to be objectified? Why can't I walk down the street and acknowledge someone without looking for something? And so that was kind of what the beginning of that song was.
Just really quick on that point, being a young woman in Santa Cruz and expressing that experience just in general from being friendly and whatnot, do you know, I sit on the city's commission for the prevention of violence against women, like I said before, and one of their roles is to make the prevention of violence against women the top priority of the city. So it's a great mission. There's a lot of work that needs to go in to make that happen, but we're all dedicated commissioners, trying to figure out the best ways to make that happen.
Good on you.
What, in your perspective, growing up here in Santa Cruz, operating out in the world and walking the streets, doing music and saying hello to people, what would you like to see change or improve in Santa Cruz or in the world to address the prevention of violence against women?
Well, I think that having the community kind of they had these rallies when I was about 10 or 11. They used to have these rallies where someone would be up on a stand downtown talking about the anti-violence center and talking about all of these different places that we could go and really forcing the community to recognize, because a lot of people don't even know where it is. It's on Ocean Street, by the way, for everybody that doesn't know. And it's just a resource that not a lot of people know exists here. And I think that having more outreach like that is having people just like out in the community talking about it is something that's really going to have a lot of people really notice what's going on. You know what I mean? Like those people that do like catcall and kind of creep on younger girls and stuff like that. It's gonna happen everywhere,
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, it sucks, but it's real, and it's something that I feel like just needs to be addressed through talking about it in the community. Because a lot of people, if they're like that and someone's talking about it, you know what I mean? They're gonna have that little feeling of guilt, like, wow, they're kind of talking about me, huh? And shove it down their throats is honestly where I think is the best form of action.
Right, and I really appreciate you saying that, because there's a lot of people don't know that the SART program, which is the Sexual Assault Response Team program, which does the emergency rape test kits, that program had been moved over to Santa Clara for this last year. So anyone that had experienced sexual assault or sexual violence had to get in the back of a police car and drive over to San Jose to get the test done, which is an incredibly invasive process, and then had to come back to Santa Cruz. So we've been pushing for them to bring it back to Santa Cruz for the last year, and it's scheduled to come back in January, but they only have 4 trained nurses, only one of which lives in Santa Cruz County. The other 3 live over the hill in San Jose or Santa Clara County. And one of the things that is a impeding factor is the cost of housing. Now, the program itself is hyper funded. They have a 30% increase in their funding actually over the last year. So one of the suggestions I made at the commission meeting on Wednesday night of this 2 nights ago was, is there a way that that money could be allocated to offer subsidized housing for nurses so that they could live in the county and not have to be traveling over the hill and could be here locally in the community? The other side to that too is the sheriff's department has been the one that's been facilitating the program. So it's made it really hard for nurses to be able to get authorized to become nurses because they have to get through the law enforcement background check, which means that even if they ever run in with marijuana in their past, then they can't become SART nurses, which has detrimentally impacted the staffing of the program. And Dominican used to be the one that manages it, but because of the lack of nurses available, they sent it to the sheriff's department, and then the sheriff's department took it over to Santa Clara. So it's been this really interesting structure, but talking about it is incredibly important because the general public didn't know about it. If there are people outside in the community that are looking for government bodies that are working on this kind of stuff, they don't know the commission exists. I've talked to so many people and they have no idea that there's a city commission for the prevention of violence against women. And what's extra disheartening is that every time we have a meeting, because we meet in the city council chambers, so the commissioners are up on the city council dais or whatever, and then there's the hall, the room with all the pews, and it's always totally empty. And so I really want to start getting more people to come to those meetings so that they can understand about what's going on within the work of the prevention of violence against women. But even more importantly is to hold us as commissioners accountable for taking the strongest steps possible to make sure that we're addressing these issues so that people like yourself can feel comfortable walking down the street smiling at people without having to feel that threat of being catcalled and or harassed in a way you don't want to do it. So thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for including it in your music.
Well, absolutely, but not even that is also rape culture isn't something that anybody wants to talk about. And that's another thing that, now that you've mentioned that, something that comes to mind is we have a bunch of pre-nurses that are learning at Cabrillo. I think that we should have a SART nurse come down and talk. Maybe if they have to go through the sheriff's department, maybe we can kind of groom younger people that are really into this topic. Like, I know a lot of girls that are training to become nurses that are caring. They're empaths, and most girls we know, sadly but truly, have experienced some sort of this violence. And so I think that it would be really cool if we had SART nurses that came into Cabrillo to talk to potential nurses about what it means to be a SART nurse, and having, little rallies downtown, really like raising awareness to the public of what's going on and what we have available to us and how we can treasure it. You know what I mean? How we can back it up, because that's what it needs. Is if that's the sheriff's department and we need to change it out of there, that's something that us as the people kind of need to step out. You are doing great things, you know what I mean? But I just wish there were more people to back you up. You know what I mean?
Well, that's where the music and power aspect comes in, because someone like yourself is in a unique position to be able to use your voice to communicate these kinds of ideas to the community and encourage them to get more involved, even if it's not in one of your songs directly, but speaking out about it when you're on stage in front of crowds of people, to let them know where you stand with your principles or the things that you focus on or think that are important, because music is power. And if someone that you are resonating with that's on stage performing, who you feel a connection to, then turns around after their song is done and say, hey, this is something you should think about, it's going to imbue itself into people's minds and then have that ability to shift their consciousness and move forward. And yes, rape culture is very present, especially here in Santa Cruz. I've spoken with many women throughout the campaign and my time on the commission and just in my own personal life about their experiences. And downtown especially, there's a lot of concern, and it's not, a lot of people go, oh, it must be all of the people that are transients or living outside, and that's not the people that are perpetrating these activities against the people that I talk to. They're everyday working class or upper class people that are making inappropriate comments. And so those, we really need to bring attention and focus on them. So I'm glad. And speaking of outreach, just since we're on the topic, on October 6th is the Transforming Together conference that's going to be taking place at the London Nelson Community Center, that's being coordinated by the Commission for the Prevention of Violence Against Women. So that'll be a great opportunity for community members to come and learn more about the work that we do. But ideally, either sign up as volunteers or find out when our next meeting is so they can come in. By the way, if you're listening to this, which you are because you're listening to this, the next commission meeting for the Commission for the Prevention of Violence Against Women is scheduled for Wednesday, the 3rd of October at 6:45 p.m. in the City Council chambers. So if you want to come and learn more about what's going on and voice your opinions about the ways that Santa Cruz can improve on the way that it addresses violence against women, come down, say what's up, and let me know what you're thinking about, because that's super important.
Yeah, do that. We like that.
So that was only the first line of your song. So what?
All right. Well, I guess the song kind of goes into, you elevate my eyes, you penetrate my mind, which is basically, for me, was thinking about issues like that and thinking about all of these different thoughts and these kind of, when you get to that age, your brain changes and you get from the point of thinking in a smaller box and you get a little hole poked in it and you're like, wow, that's the outside world.
Outside of the box.
I don't live in a bubble.
Mm-hmm.
Holy moly. And it was just kind of talking about how as I got more and more conscious, how it elevated how I critically thought about things and how I perceived information and what I did with it. And yeah, that's kind of the chorus of the song, is just being like, you elevate my eyes, was just like experience, kind of opening you up to what's going on, what's really happening. And then
there was a line in there that says your government won't waste a single cent, but I didn't catch what came after that. Do you remember that line?
Helping to reaffirm command.
Oh, tell me more.
So basically, I just got to the point where my grandfather is very politically informed, and me and him, we're very close, and we go on walks and drink coffees and discuss all of these different things. And at the time, I can't remember exactly what we were talking about, but he told me, he was like, well, Santa Cruz, we're not necessarily very political, and I was like, wow. So I thought about that, and at the time I was going to this school called the Waldorf School, and I took it back to my class. I was like, we're not very political, huh? I don't want Santa Cruz to be like that. Well, I think he made an uninformed little snippet on that, but that's okay. I love you, Grandpa, if you ever listen to this. And so I took it to my school, and I started talking to all the kids there, because Waldorf, it's a private school, and so it's a lot of kind of more sheltered kids, and so I brought it back, and I was talking to them, and I realized that they weren't really informed on anything. So I kind of talked to them, and I was like, how do you think this works? And they were like, well, Santa Cruz is a really safe bubble, and we're doing fine, and America's great. And I was just like, no, dude, like no, this is not how this works. You're not supported. Where do you think taxes go? And they're like, taxes?
No, they don't pay taxes.
I'm like 12. Yeah. What do I know about taxes? And I'm like, dude, we're just losing all of our money. And I had like a little identity crisis about it. And yeah, that's that.
Well, that's good that you were thinking about it as early as 13 with regards to politics in Santa Cruz. And it's interesting just that it caught my ear, because one of the talking points that I always bring up when I'm engaging with people in conversations about politics in Santa Cruz is money. Because my campaign for city council is moving away from money to try and illustrate a point that you can accomplish more with less. And so right now the city spends an exorbitant amount of money on things that are not very effective. And so being able to reallocate that money and put it in more effective places, like addressing the prevention of violence against women, like addressing the issues of houselessness and homelessness, like addressing issues of education, transportation, and housing, right? All of these things that money could be going towards, but instead is being funneled. And again, we talked about the funneling of money up into a very small population of city workers that make over $150,000 to $200,000 a year, which is an exorbitant amount of money. Where, like, for example, the city manager who oversees the city has made $1.3 million over the last 5 years, just $1.3 million. But at the same time, the city is claiming that it's in a fiscal emergency, which is cutting community programs that provide nutritional programs for newborns, Meals on Wheels programs for the elderly, trips to the vets hospital for veterans. So those programs are being able to be sacrificed, but the upper echelon pay has not not decreased at all. So it really is interesting. Your government won't waste a single cent on reaffirming command, since it's the conversation of community power and how we are working to build a more equitable city, but instead the powers that be are actively trying to defund those programs that people are working on. Gray Bears, for example, a program that helps the elderly with food and rental assistance and transportation. They had $25,000 of funding that got cut down to $15,000 of funding. And then now this year I spoke with the executive director, the CEO, and he said that they had to fight to even get that, while all these really high-level paying people are still operating and running the city. So strange priorities. Dr. King, whenever I talk about budget, I always bring it back to Dr. King because one of my favorite quotes of his is, right? I always bring it back to Dr. King. A budget is a moral document. So if we look at the way that we have our money allocated, we can tell where our principles and values are based off of where we spend our money. Do we care more about underserved communities and newborns, or do we care more about a mountain bike pump track? Because and nothing against mountain biking. I think it's a really fun sport when it's done correctly and not destroying the environment.
More babies means more mountain bikers.
Right. But the city council voted to cut thousands of dollars of funding from a program that helps newborns and elderly with food and nutrition, while spending $59,000 on renovating a mountain bike pump track in one of our parks. Not to say that mountain biking and outdoor entertainment isn't important, but when you're weighing outdoor entertainment to nutrition programs for other people, especially people coming from underserved, predominantly brown communities, it makes me question if that's the direction that we want our city to go, and if that truly represents the larger population of Santa Cruz. It's really hard to think about, but important and very relevant in the conversation around city council.
That was so eloquently put. Yeah, well... Yeah, that's disheartening.
It's disheartening, but I mean, ideally, I don't mean to bring people down. I mean to fire people up, right?
Yeah,
it's like,
that's why
hey,
we should vote for you.
Me and myself and Justin Cummings. That's the thing.
Woo!
He's the other guy. When we are elected in November, he's also an African-American guy. So we'd go from 0 to 2 in 1 year, which would be amazing. And it would give us the ability to work with the existing progressive council members, Chris Crone and Sandy Brown, to actively transform the city. Because do you know how many people are on the city council?
I don't.
7. And no one knows when I ask them, unless they're actively involved in campaigning. So there's 7 people on the council. There are 3 seats up for election this November. We have 2 allies on the council already that want to see these kinds of change happen. So a majority is 4. There's a classic saying in the political world of Santa Cruz, you have to be able to count to 4 with the number of votes. So with the 4 of us on the council with these ideals and visions of how Santa Cruz can be a place that works for everyone, we'll be able to reallocate those funds and improve social programs, fix the transportation systems, look at increasing affordable housing development. The possibilities are endless of the way the Santa Cruz can go, but that's one of the reasons why this election is so important, is because this will shape the next 4, 8, or 10 years of Santa Cruz, is who gets elected in this election in November. So just want to stress that to all the listeners out there, how important it is that you get out and vote. I talk to a lot of people every day, and there are some people out there that don't vote. Do you know anyone in your life that doesn't vote?
I do.
Yeah. Why? Do you talk about politics with your friends?
I do. Sometimes. A lot of them more. We get to the subject of politics, and they're like, "Well, Trump's just a expletive."
Right.
And they're like, "Well, we're just gonna go to the dogs anyway, so like, why care?" And I was like, "Well, it doesn't always have to be that grand scale, Like, what are you thinking about here?" And that's when like bringing up the subject of the Nonviolence Center comes up, and like talking about the Red Cross and all of these different things, and like Food Not Bombs and like different stuff like that. And they're just a lot of my friends just really don't think on that small scale. You know what I mean? A lot of people that are my peers more think about, oh, well, Trump's awful, the government's going to shit.
Both correct statements.
And you're just sitting there like, well, what about our mini government? Because we're a little biosphere here.
We are.
What about ours? And a lot of people just don't. There's no moving past the fear that comes from the presidency to really open your eyes to the smaller governments that are happening.
There's an important conversation going around that mindset too, because a lot of people look at politics and the first thing they think of is Trump. And then they're like, oh, everything's terrible, like you mentioned before. But what a lot of people don't realize is that Trump is a symptom of a much larger and consistent problem within the United States, where there's a very low participation in the voting process, especially around local municipalities and state government, because state government influences a whole lot of stuff on the federal level because of the representation from senators and assembly people and having that pool of power statewide. And that is the same thing with local politics, is that if people intentionally come out and vote for progressive values, then those are the voices that are going to be crafting policy, and those are the ones that are going to be influencing the communities that we live in to the point where we'll eventually reach critical mass, and then this consciousness wave will take over the world, as some nonviolence scholars suggest. It requires a certain percentage of people to be subscribed to the mindset, and then it will take over without there being much resistance. But with voting, it's statistically proven that when people show up to vote, then people with progressive values win, especially students, especially youth, especially people of color. So when I talk to people that are disheartened by the state of the world or the way things are going, it's important to realize that their vote or lack of a vote directly impacts not only them, but other people in the world. Because if you're someone that supports progressive values, that you support diversity, you support equity, but you're not voting, the people that do vote traditionally are people that are homeowners, that are older, and that are retired. So they have very special interests that they're trying to protect. If I own a home or I rent a property, I'm going to fight as much as I can against rent control or having to have my landlord rights taken away. If I am retired and I don't care about working class people because I got my retirement, I'm not going to fight for a living wage. If I am someone who owns a business but doesn't want to have to pay union dues, I'm going to fight against unionization and union and workers' rights. So it's when people come out that are actively have skin in the game, people that are renters, people that are union workers, people that are underserved, it will make a huge difference. But like I mentioned before, it will also negatively impact people that are either unable to vote because of their documentation status, or people that do vote but don't have the support of the larger population of voters to push those ideals through. So you're left with ICE and immigration. You're left with all of these other kinds of things which negatively impact underserved communities and make it harder for them to survive just because you don't want to vote. So I always encourage people to think outside of themselves, to think larger than their own viewpoints, their own, as you said a couple of times, their own bubble, because everything exists outside. That's one of the reasons why I really appreciate your mentioning of diversity and exposure to culture earlier, is that's why I lead a cultural exchange trip to Selma, Alabama every year. It's the hotbed of the voting rights movement in the late 60s or in the 60s. And it gives people from Santa Cruz, because I was born and raised here, but I'm black. But I went there, and it's 80% black of the population there. And it was such a culture shock to go from Santa Cruz to Selma. And so this year, I coordinated a trip with 12 other people to come with me to Selma, and we spent a week out there doing community service projects, touring the history of the city, meeting people that were involved in the historic marches, and the youth that are out there talking about their visions and what they're working on. And while we were there, we did permaculture projects. So we built raised beds that now are flourishing with organic vegetables in a place where the ground is so hard from clay and poisoned by pesticides from the cotton trade during slavery that they can't grow food in the ground where they are from. So we had to build raised beds, and now it's amazing. We'll be going back again twice this year in March. We'll go the first of the week or the first of the month in March for the Jubilee, which is to go and participate in the 5-day celebration of the Bloody Sunday March across the bridge and the Voting Rights Act and all of the civil rights activism that took place to get up to that point. And then we go back again with a different group of people at the end of the month for the spring break time, where we go and we do more community service work. So it's a great opportunity. Hopefully you'll choose to come with us. It would be great to have you come and join us on that trip. It'll be really fun. And are there any other issues that you care about in Santa Cruz that we haven't talked about yet?
Oh, man.
I know there's a bunch of them.
Well, honestly, bringing back to a point that we were talking about earlier was when we were talking about the rape culture was how a lot of people do immediately want to blame our homeless community. And they don't want to point the finger at the wealthier or the people that are getting by just fine, which are most of the people that are aggressive in those ways are just the run-of-the-mill people that are just walking around being normal, you know what I mean? And it's always easier to point your finger at the little guy. And that's another thing that really speaks to me about growing up here and busking downtown Santa Cruz is I met this guy, Rick, when I was like 13 and I first busked downtown. And he had some problems with drugs. He's not with us anymore. But he had problems with drugs, and so he became homeless because he lost his housing and his wife left him and he lost everything. And he was downtown just wandering around, and he came and had a slide guitar and came and started playing with me, and we would play together a lot.
Oh, wow.
And the thing that really broke my heart is that myself playing, dressed up all cute, you know, with my big smile and my little fancy tip jar, just playing would get people to come up and be like, wow, you're doing so good, and put money in the jar. And as soon as he would come sit with me, people would avoid making eye contact. Like, they're of course the people. Santa Cruz is still a really cool place, you know. Some people are still, yeah, that's real good. But it was cut down by like 75%, and people would look at the ground when they walked past us, just because he wasn't dressed in nice clothes. He would wear the same thing for weeks on end and not get recognized as someone that's making music just like everybody else.
Right.
It's like when you're that low and you're trying to express your art, like it broke my heart to sit there, and me, who's lucky enough to have parents that supported me when I was that age, to just go out there, look all cute, and everyone's like, oh yeah, here's our money. But then as soon as the guy that really needs it comes out with his art, and he surpassed me by leaps and bounds as his guitar playing, was literally not even made eye contact with because of the way that he was living. As unfortunately, there's a really intense stigma against people that are living outside. The guest last week, Brent Adams, talks about how he became homeless for a while, and unfortunately, friends that he had at one point no longer were his friends anymore because they had the stigma about him being homeless. That's how he recounts the story. So it's a very real thing, especially when people see them as a burden. They see people that are experiencing homelessness as just trying to leech off the system and all those other kinds of things, which we know aren't true by the people that we talk to on the streets. And, you know, hopefully people that are listening to this that are like, what's this guy talking about? He doesn't know what he's talking. Go down and talk to people downtown and learn about their story. There was a guy that was sitting on the corner just leaving the Trader Joe's parking lot with a crutch. And I was out there talking to people about the Poor People's Campaign. I just went and I kneeled down next to him and we just chatted to get to know where he was coming from. And he had hurt his leg or had to have surgery or something, so he couldn't participate or work. So instead, and to be able to exist, he has to sit on the corner there and ask for change from people coming out of the Trader Joe's because he doesn't have any other option to exist in Santa Cruz. He's not a bad person. He's not involved with drugs or alcohol. He's a super cool dude, but
I can speak for myself. I've driven past him 7 or 8 times without even stopping and talking with him because I was on my way doing something or whatever. And I have a different perspective of people than I think a lot of other people might in the average world if you were to do a straw poll of people. But I encourage everyone else to take a moment and talk to someone that you don't know in a safe space. Of course, don't put yourself in a dangerous situation, but intentionally talk with people, because it's when you make that connection human to human and understand each other that you're coming from a place of love and compassion and just wanting to exist in a world that is accepting and provides the support that you need to reach your maximum potential. Dr. King called that creating the beloved community. When you meet people that are also in tune with that energy or vibe of wanting to make the community the best place it can be for everyone, there is an unspeakable connection that just happens. And like, I want to go back and hang out with that guy. Every time I'm back there, I'm like, man, I got to go get like a thing of bread or a thing of peanut butter or something to go and take to him. Anyway, I could go on for a long time about the importance of respecting and loving other people.
I'm right there with you. And also what you were saying is it's all about, exactly, it's not stigmify and being there and making eye contact. You know what I mean? Is like, there's still people.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a lot of the people downtown Santa Cruz is like, they're not dangerous. Like, exactly. Don't put yourself in a dangerous situation if someone's obviously on drugs. You know what I mean? Don't walk up to them and be like, hey, how you doing?
Right.
You want to have a cup of coffee? But like, yeah, exactly. Take the time to be receptive to people and treat everyone with the same amount of respect. Like, some people have demons that lead them to be in certain places, and that doesn't make them a bad person. You know what I mean? Just because they aren't at the same place you are doesn't mean anything. Mm-hmm. It just means that they're in a different place than you are. Yep. Literally.
Different place on the journey.
Yeah.
That's what counts.
Oh, man, I just love your message. I think you're great.
I think you're pretty awesome, too. It's been great to have you on the show. If you tuned in late or you cut through half of the podcast and didn't catch the beginning, we are visited by Trianna Feruza, a local musician raised in Santa Cruz, blessing us with her music, perspective, views on life, and background about where she's coming from and where she hopes to go. I look forward to seeing you at that dream show of yours, which I'm sure will happen eventually with this message and with your skills. Why do you support the Why are you here? Like, why do you support the campaign? Like, what brings you on the show?
What I really support is your motivation for community. Is the way that you really do show up for the things that you say. A lot of people that try to run for council, it's a lot of talk in politics and not a lot of showing up. And you've shown up. You're on the chair for all of these boards. You know all of this information. You make a point to be educated on all of these things that you really care about, and that speaks to me. I think being motivated to be part of the change is something that in America we lack. We lack a lot of motivation for the community and for other people. And I love the empathy. I love the mission. I love the drive. It's all good.
Well, it's an honor to have your support. I really appreciate it. Absolutely. And I look forward to working with you more. Hopefully you'll come and play some music for the campaign at some point between now and November. We can figure out a way to make it happen. And like I said, I've already talked to you with my friend Kat, who I'm sure will be on the show eventually, and who also will be playing at my rally, which will be featuring Kimberly Ellis as a guest speaker. But that's on September 22nd from 5 to 7 p.m. at the Pacific Arts Complex on Soquel. That's 1122 Soquel, so I hope that you can join us so you can come and touch base with Kat, hear the message, and get a chance to listen to Kimberly Ellis, who is an amazing progressive leader in the Democratic Party of the state of California. I just look forward to everything that we can create together.
Look forward for voting.
Yeah, right. That's right, and you're old enough to vote. I'm sure you got friends that are too. If you enjoyed what you heard on the podcast, share this with your friends, because that's the way that we're going to get the message out. We're walking neighborhoods. We're looking for volunteers. We're looking for people that want to help spread our message on social media too, because this is going to be not only on YouTube, but it'll be on Facebook. And we also put out a whole bunch of other stuff. So if you're listening to this, go back and check out the other episodes. We've had so many amazing people on the show. This is just another one to add to the notch of great interviews, important conversations, and pertinent topics that impact all of us. This song, even that we're listening to on the way out, if you recognize the voice, that's Trianna Feruza. This is a a song called Lighter that's on her SoundCloud. You can check it out. The link will be in the comment section of the podcast. And again, if you ever want to say anything, let me know what you're thinking or figure out ways that we can always be better. Leave a message in the comments or send me an email directly. contact@drewgloverforcitycouncil.com. Again, my name is Drew Glover, your host for Pod for the People, episode 8. I can't believe we're on episode 8 already. It's been super quick. Mad props to the 365 producer program and everyone involved in the project. I look forward to talking to y'all next week. I'll see you then.